Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Plaw, at Andrew Plaw Tech. Check me out on all the socials. Back with another episode of the greatest weekly PowerShell podcast in existence. Every single week, it's a new episode. And last week, the conversation was going. Fred was on a roll. I was digging the vibe. So we decided, you know what, let's extend the convo. Let's keep it going a little bit. So I am joined again by Fred, longtime friend, one of the most advanced PowerShellers that I know in existence right now, living on this earth, joining us for another conversation. Thank you, Fred. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me again, Andrew.
What do you know the least about in PowerShell? Like, you know, make me feel good about myself. What do you know the least about? What do you struggle with?
Okay, struggle implies that I'm using it much, but it kind of goes hand in hand with knowing the least about. And one of my absolutely biggest gap, I'll be honest, besides that configuration. I know the theory. I have lab deployments, of course. I've written my own DSC resources to a certain degree, but I have virtually zero in the field experience with some real life enterprise level applications and, you know, hands-on doing things actually at a scale that matters, where the clean sanitary lab environment just doesn't work anymore, where you have to do more than just, you know, quick proof of concept. I don't have that because, well, the engagements in the last year simply did not work out in that direction. And, well, that's probably my largest, most significant and pointable gap. I'm pretty sure I've got other gaps, but the problem is the others, they're kind of sneaky. They don't show themselves until they ambush me. So that's the one I really can point at and tell, yep,
That's fair.
Not my strongest suit.
Because, you know, I was mentioning how great you are at PowerShell and all this stuff. And to me, from what I know about you, it makes sense why you are such a high-level PowerSheller. You're always using it, especially with your job now. You've had a lot of exposure, a lot of time to be at very deep levels of PowerShell multiple times. So it's not the first time you've seen X, Y, or Z. It's the 20th, and your brain is sort of existing in that space, so it's not that big of a deal. And I think that one thing that you have that might be similar to an amazing artist or an amazing writer out there is that the process, and this is my impression, so correct me if I'm wrong, the process for you to go from basically pen to paper, like to actually go from idea in mind to contributing code, your workflow is really efficient. Is that correct? Would you say it's really quick for you to go from, hey, let me solve this, to contributed code?
As a matter of fact, yes. Specifically, I have formalized and optimized that process. Sometimes the inner nerd gets away from me. It happens. That's when I'm playing around with code. Sometimes I get some like weird inspiration, and 2 hours later I'm waking up and I've got this magic superpower thing that I didn't realize I could do in less than 3 days. That happens too. But that's kind of, you know, like you're playing the lottery and you're getting the big win. Sometimes it works out, but you really should not be counting on it when you depend on it. So I do have a process from I've got a problem to I've got the process on implementing it to I'm implementing it. I have the reliable tool chain prepared and tested again and again, and keeping refining it. That helps me accelerate that. For example, a few years ago already, I did a live demo from I've got a couple of loose functions to have a PowerShell module that is in GitHub, has the full test pipeline, fully executed for you, and released it into the PowerShell gallery. That demo took me 10 minutes.
Wow. Yeah.
And with that, I have simply, especially with the PS framework-based tools that I, of course, have pretty full mastery of. So I know how the features work. I know what their intention is. I know how to do that. With that, it's quite frankly harder and takes more effort for me to write bad code than it takes me to write good code. And the combination of that, it's just an accelerant that can work with most problems. Incidentally, that process is one of the sessions that I got accepted for the PowerShell Summit this year.
Oh, nice. You're going to be speaking at Summit?
I'm going to speak at the summit, and one of those is going to be on script design. I've got a problem. I've got an empty sheet of paper. What do I do? How do I approach this before the first line of code falls?
That makes sounds like a session I need to get on my agenda for this year's summit. Now,
wait a second, Andrew. You were considering not attending one of my sessions?
oh, how could I? That doesn't sound like me. No. Fred, you got the wrong guy. But Fred, I want to speak to that because, I know whenever I looked at you, especially earlier on, I'd see what you're doing. I'd say like, dude, that is just out of this world level stuff. But let's break it down a little bit. So you have a tool set, you have that side of things, and your tool set is very mature at this point in time. And using, not only is the tool set mature, but your comfortability, your ability to use it, your knowledge of it is very advanced, which makes things super easy. And also just, you sort of gotten there brick by brick though, right? Like you've gotten really comfortable with GitHub over the years. It's not even a second thought. It is fluid for you, no biggie. Do you remember when that wasn't the case? When you were sort of struggling and these were all newer concepts for you?
I do remember the dark ages, yes.
How long ago was that?
It's not quite the literal historical dark ages, but it started in 2017. In 2017, it changed my game, really. Before that, I was I'm just going to say I was kind of like the archetypal conference attendee. Not in that I was attending conferences, but who do you see other than the speakers at the conference most of the time? It's like the one PowerShell guy of the company. The one person who's enthusiastic about PowerShell, who's trying to improve his game or her game. And none of the coworkers understands them really, or wants to deal with the PowerShell. Some of them are at the one-liners level or something. So you're a solo fighter. You're doing your thing. You're doing it good. Your actual understanding of the technical way PowerShell works is good. I mean, of course, if you're an autodidact teaching yourself, there are some things you miss simply because you never thought to question that. That just happens. But on average, your actual implementation skills on a technical level are good. But you were always a solo fighter. So there are a lot of the process tools that simply were missing for me. And I have the same observation with a lot of the workshop attendees. I'm delivering workshops as part of my role at Microsoft. So I'm seeing meeting a lot of people attending the first PowerShell workshop ever. And they all have the same experience, that they're mostly fairly alone in them. And they collect people from different teams from the company just to get a workshop full. And, well, they never had something pushing them into giving this GitHub thing a chance. I mean, it's really hard to conceptualize what benefit is this going to add to me when it's just like another step I need to put the script file into a folder. It's really hard to grasp. For me, the real breaking thing in 2017 was when I started contributing to dbatools, where I suddenly had to deal with other people that actually cared, rather than other people that were kind of happy that they could push all the PowerShell stuff to Fred. But while that dbatools thing, that gave me a real ego boost, because my tech skills, my implementation skills were, quite honestly, better than the other team members. I had, in comparison, zero experience with SQL Server, of course. I mean, let's be honest, every single project member that could run circles around me when it comes to Microsoft SQL Server. It's kind of part of the project there. But the PowerShell part, I knew what I was doing. I knew they needed help. And I gave that help, and I was paid in smileys and recognition. And, well, actually, there were a few people who understood enough PowerShell to understood what I was actually doing there and understand the value that I was providing. So there's some feedback thing going on. I was getting some positive reinforcements rather than like positive apathy. Like, yeah, good, it's gone. Thanks, I didn't need to deal with PowerShell. Thank you very much. So that started things, and that started the rest of the tool chain. the thinking about the tool chain, because before that it was just like me and myself in my echo chamber doing things, and it was working. I didn't have any comparison base. I was a solo fighter. I didn't have anybody else there. And let's be honest, GitHub wasn't as omnipresent back then as it is today when it comes to PowerShell. Back then, we were talking about the TechNet gallery and some blog posts and a few GitHubs. So there was little contact with all of the dev side. It was a pure admin before that had some scripts. I mean, okay, that had a lot of scripts. But this whole thing that provoked thought about how do I do my coding? What's out there? What tools could I be using? Things like automatic testing. That was a lot of pain. That was a lot of annoyance. That was a lot of like, why can't you just let me do my PowerShell thing? It works. I know it works. It worked on my machine. And at the beginning, there was a lot of, it was a lot of extra effort for little perceived value until I had to live with the process for a while with dbatools. So I did realize the first time I actually did mess something up because I messed up the testing on my machine, and the automatic tests caught that issue before I ruined the next release for everybody. So, hey, wait a second, maybe those automatic tests actually are good and provide value, and maybe I should not try to skirt them. Oh, maybe I need to do better documentation so people that are not me understand what that command is doing. So there are a lot of soft skills you learn with that, of having to collaborate with others. And there are a lot of things that when you're working on your own, it's just hard to see the initial value they provide to the point that you are willing to put the effort in to change the way you work until now, the way I'm currently am. It provides value even for my solo projects that wouldn't have been possible and thinkable before. I literally would not have imagined that and conceptualized that. How that, changes everything for me. The starting point really that helped me was, working with other people on a project. Getting other perspectives, even if I was the PowerShell expert on the team. I learned so much because coding is not just the plain tech skills. There's organizational, there's collaboration, there's soft skills, and there's procedural skills that, just add up in combination at the end once you have everything in, and once you have a routine. Once you have paid the initial investment, it's paid itself back so much. I can't mass-produce code. That would be unthinkable. And I mean, you see my repositories. You see the code that I'm producing. It's not like I'm spitting out fast, high-speed crap.
It's quality stuff. I agree with that. You're solving some complex problems for sure at times. I want to highlight, though, how important that is. And, gosh, even for me, this is where I am with things. Been super impressed by your work, but now that we've peeled behind the layers a little bit, it actually makes total sense. And it's sort of like the way we tell a lot of people to go. Yeah, dbatools is a bigger project than maybe most people will contribute to. But I think that general process of, hey, you're writing PowerShell, you're embracing it internally, you're trying to adhere to best practices, you're trying to teach other people. Okay, you're creating modules. Okay, we want to contribute to open source. You contribute to dbatools. And that is sort of your launching pad of, let me go best practice. Let me, actually hear appreciation from other people in the community. That can feel really good and invigorating and be a launch pad for other things. And I think that's the same path we've told a lot of people out there works and to replicate. So you sort of are just kind of following the basic blueprint, but you've just adhered to it really well. You did a great job.
Thank you.
That's cool. That's relatable. I like that. So we came on here. We got part 2, man. And, it's great to talk about code. And you know what? I'm going to keep talking about code. But I think it's a good opportunity here to showcase some cool stuff you've been working on. And I think particularly in the PowerShell package management space. I think we were teasing this on the previous episode, right?
Oh, yes, I do have the first release of, my toolkit around simplifying the whole experience. Basically, when you're trying to get started with package management, there are a lot of inconsistencies and points of confusion that make it hard for somebody who is at the point of initial investment, of stepping into that space. And well, this red stuff happens on screen and it doesn't work as expected. And it's a lot of figuring out and making things work until they become routine, which is perfectly fine for a developer who, like, their development is part of their core job. But for most admins out there, it's kind of like something they want to have on their side to make their main job work better and smoother. So they don't have like 2 days time to fully dig into it and make it work. It just needs to get working. And that's kind of where I stepped in with my toolkit. For various reasons, there's a long story how I stepped into that, but basically it started off with Fred needing to solve one of his problems, his nerd brain figuring out, hey, wait a sec, with your problem, you have so many other problems you have to deal with, why not make something completely overkill that solves it for everybody? So I started down that road, and once more, again and again, nerd brain told me, hey, Fred, while you're at it, why don't you add X? Why don't you add Y? Until we are now at something that pretty much wraps most of PowerShellGet in a user-friendly way. So that's what I am going to, showcase. Once I get this whole screen share thing going properly. Present, share screen, and let's see whether we can make this work.
Yeah, while we get that up, for those of you who are just listening, I will do my best to describe what we're looking at here. And if you want to see the full version, check out the YouTube version of our show. And shucks, I mean, if you're going through all those steps, might as well hit like and subscribe while you're at it. Maybe leave a comment saying, Fred, you rock. That's an amazing beard. Actually, let us know, is your beard longer or shorter than Fred's? Curious to know. And if you don't have a beard at all, I'm going to go with shorter.
And if you're Rob Sewell, don't answer. I don't want to know.
Rob, I think he has
He's got the beard.
Yeah. Awesome. So just to sort of recap, so we're talking about PowerShell package management here. You've created a solution here that sort of provides a lot of helpers and provides, I think you'd argue, a better user experience. Is that fair?
That's at least my intention. Very much so, yes.
All right.
So let's get started with that. First of all, we have basically 2 sets of modules to install install modules. We have got the old PowerShellGet and the new PSResourceGet.
Yep.
So one of them has the command, for example, get PS repository. That's the old one, which shows us where PowerShell is going to grab its modules from. We have, by default, built in the PS gallery. And come on, you can do it. Please don't tell me the VS Code is doing its best job to prevent my session. It is doing its best job to prevent my sessions. Kind of the usual demo god thing, you know. You're trying to make something work, and it did the entire week, but that one moment you need it. Well, here we are.
That's how it goes. Hey, that's relatable. Sometimes I'll try and show people PowerShell stuff, and you know, a little close the little terminal, maybe reopen it. I don't know.
So restarting the terminal worked. So I've got the PS repository. It's the PS gallery. I set it to trusted because, well, I kind of know what modules I'm installing. By default, it's not trusted because this, as you can see, is on the internet. And pretty much every person can set up an account and publish whatever module. And while antivirus is going to scan this, that is only so much reliable. So it's
like our previous conversation, right? Like, yeah, it's an external repository. We don't trust that. If we internalize it, that's fine, but that's sort of the distinction there.
Yeah, I've just defined it to trusted for me because I do it for so much for demos, and it's just going to interfere all the time for modules that I exactly know what I'm doing with because I published them. I've got quite a few modules up there, so I judge it to be acceptable for me to set it trusted. So We have the old get PS repository. You can see what it's returning, an object with 3 properties for now. PS Gallery is the name, installation policy trusted, and the URL, the source location where we are installing it from, https www.powershellgallery.com/API/v2. Now, the new one, get PS resource repository, it has mostly the same thing. We have the URI, we have the name, it's set to trusted, and it has this nice column with priority, which is a new thing. Not going to go too much into details on that. They're basically trying to offer the same service. It's only different commands we access them to because they are not exactly feature equal, which is one of the problems. You've got 2 different sets of commands. Which are you going to use? Which features are available to you? Which parameters do you have? Kind of confusing. So what we now have is a command called get PSF repository. Get PSF repository once it's done actually executing. Okay, I'm done with this. If VS Code is not giving me service, I'm not giving VS Code console, integrated console a service. Tip, if your integrated VS Code console is messing up, you can switch to a standalone console by adding a new console tab in VS Code, and that is not going to be affected by hanging VS PowerShell extension, which is hanging because of things I did to it at one point. I'm going to actually dig into just what, but you know how it is. It only is a bother when you're actually trying to demo.
They say mess around and find out. And you know what? If you're a tinker, if you're messing around, sometimes you're going to find out. And sometimes it's in the middle of a demo, but that's all right. We rock with it.
Yeah.
But get PSF repository. This is the command that you wrote.
This is the command I wrote. And as you can see, we get 2 PS galleries here. And they all have a priority. They all have a trusted property. They have a URI where they're going to. They have a status, which just means they are ready to use. There's some involved there. And they have a type property. And one of them is v3. The other one is v2.
Okay. So that's a distinction that's worth exploring. What's the type? What's v2 and v3?
Actually, that's a bit of a historical thing. When we introduced the new get PS resource repository, install PS resource, in the original versions, it was still called PowerShellGet. And it had a version 3 dot something. While PowerShellGet, the old version, had initially shipped with Windows with version 1 dot something, and was later upgraded to 2 dot. So this was the major version number of the module involved. We can show that, get module PowerShell get, and you can see this is major version 2. That's where v2 versus v3 is coming in. Since I have been working on this module for more than a year, this naming convention actually predates the rename to Microsoft PowerShell.PSResourceGet, and well, here we are. So we have lots of great tools in there, and the first and easiest part that we really want to do is like install a module. I mean, that's the whole thing we're all about here. So I'm going to install PSF module. And I'm going to install, well, what am I going to install? Let's install, you know what? I'm going to install Entra. I just shipped the latest version, so that one would be good. And yes, I'm happy to brag about that project later on. It's a fun tool, but not trying to get sidetracked too much. So first thing, it worked. We get now a return object. The default install module or install PS resource would not return something. They would just work or they would not work.
Okay.
This command is going to return objects. It's going to tell you what computer it installed it on. More on that soon. It's going to tell you what module. It is going to tell you what version. It tells you whether it worked out. If it did not work out, you get a message of why it did not work out. Let's try that. And I'm going to grab that. Result equals install thing. It's hopefully just going to work. And it actually worked. Okay, it should not have. We'll need to look into that. Demos are great for figuring out the things you messed up. But there's one more item I want to show off here, and that is it also has the property just where it installed it. This is going to get relevant in quite a bit, actually in literally the next part. Because we now have, this nice ability to install a module. And you might remember the scope parameter.
Okay.
We have the ability to install for the current user or for all users. Where exactly on the machine that is, that kind of depends. So we have that. And I have current user, all user, and you know what? There's also a scope called all users win PS.
What is that? That's new. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's absolutely new. Now, for all users, I need an elevated console. So here's my elevated console. And I'm going to try to install that. By the way, if you don't provide a scope, even if your console is elevated, it's going to install the current user.
And that's default behavior. That's not a decision you made?
That's an intentional decision I made.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because this is Windows PowerShell. Yes.
No, it's not about Windows PowerShell. I mean, in all cases, you just run install PSF module name. Even if your console is elevated, it is going to use the current user scope, not the all users.
Which, that seems like an okay choice, right? I mean, current behavior in PowerShell 7 is, or the default behavior is current user. And that seems to be a little bit just more user-friendly because you don't need the elevation thing. Okay.
Yep. So here's the thing. We are in PowerShell 7.4.6.
Gotcha.
I use the scope all users win PS, and now the module is stored in Windows PowerShell, not in the PowerShell folder.
Okay, so meaning that module will not be accessible.
It will be accessible from all PowerShell versions.
Right, because of the compatibility thing.
Yeah. The thing is, when you're now first starting into PowerShell 7, you're trying to install a module there, and you're successful with that. Now you go back to your old version, to Windows PowerShell for whatever reason, habit or whatever. The module isn't available there. With this, you can have a uniform experience on that.
Fred, that's actually very impressive. That is a great use case. Okay, let me just reset it and make sure I'm getting it. You got Windows people learning PowerShell, or you're just a regular user. You might have heard great things about PowerShell 7, or you're a regular user of it because you use PowerShell all the time and it's got some cool features. Sometimes you have to use Windows PowerShell for work stuff, for whatever. Sometimes that's the expectation. And because of that, with this module right here, you can keep using your same kind of tools and you can install them. So if you need to hop in Windows PowerShell occasionally for this or that, you will have your same modules everywhere. You won't have to worry about this duplicated location and all this. You can just have a good experience. And I'm guessing you could also set the preference of this, like either in the profile for a parameter default kind of deal. You could set this to always be this, and then you're just kind of good to go.
Absolutely. But now is the next thing. And that's actually visible on screen. You see, when I just installed Entra Alpha without anything, it installed it into my documents folder on OneDrive. Now, installing modules on OneDrive is arguably great or not so great, depending on your OneDrive policies. Because if your modules are being pushed to the cloud only and only downloaded on demand, and PowerShell is trying to figure out what commands are available, it will now start trying to download all the modules that were pushed to cloud only. So that's a problem. There's also other access policy problems that can interfere with this. So I was wondering, Fred, while you're doing this, you may want to do this better. So I am now going to register PSF module scope. I'm going to say for the scope current user, I want you to use the following path. And I could actually make it persisted so that a new console would remember that.
Okay. So we have a register PSF module scope.
And you can override existing ones, or you can define your own ones.
So this is the module scope of installing modules.
Yes. So here we are. I overrode current user. And I'm now going to install this into that path. I'm using the default install. It's going to use current user for that. And it was now installed to ctemp demo. And there we are.
And okay, this is interesting. And I guess this approach could allow you to inspect kind of like a save script or save module. Wait, is save module even a thing? I guess the alternative where you can just download the files to look at. This could be.
You can also use save PSF module if you wanted to do that.
That is a thing. Okay.
The thing is with the scope thing, by overwriting the current user, you can make this more convenient for everyday use. With save PSF module, you always need to specify the path.
Yeah.
So let's do another fun one. Okay, I'm going to save the module psutil. I want to install it from the repository psgallery. However, I want to install it from the version 2 psgallery. And I want it to still skip dependencies. Skip dependency is a parameter only install PSResource has, not install module. But I'm still going to skip dependencies with psutil when I'm placing it into the current path. And that's one of the things that my module does. It unifies the parameters. You even have convenient everyday current parameters for the old path. You now see the dependencies downloading as the progress bar. Don't let yourself be tricked by that, because once it returns, which is going to do in a bit, and I am aware that performance is worse, but you can see that dependencies are not here. It's only the original module. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Fun things you can do with that whole thing. We have get PSF repository. We also have Z PSF repository. I can define a new repository. Let's call it ACR for Azure Container Registry. In the latest preview version of PSResourceGet, the free ResourceGet, we can now use Azure Container Registry as a PowerShell repository, which has the advantage that it has pretty much zero dependency setup. You just need an Azure resource group, and any Azure account that's connected with Connect AZ account can just install modules from there. So it has a really easy setup compared to hosting things in an Azure DevOps services artifacts repository. So for distributing PowerShell modules, if you have easy Azure access and problematic local configurations, this is a pretty good way to, well, get performance out of it. Problems, of course, you first need to set this up, and then what we need is set PSF repository, grab the URL after prepending HTTPS, because of course I forgot to put that into the URL. I would never forget anything about a prepared demo. I define this to be trusted, which is a Boolean parameter, so yes, intentionally. I could define a priority or a different one, but I don't really care. Type thing, the type one is important because only the absolutely latest v3 pre-release supports this. So I must define that. So I have a publish PSF module, of course. When I can install, I also need to be able to publish something. And I now want to publish Entra of version 1423 to the repository ACR. Now, this is a bug that is going to be fixed in the latest version because it's trying to search for the repository ACR in PowerShellGet v2, which will produce an error unless you do error action ignore, and I forgot to add that. So the next release is not going to show that error. The publishing worked. So I can now find PSF module, repository, ACR, name, Entra of. Gonna take a little bit, but there we are. So that was the entire setup step for integrating a new repository into my current process. And what I'm doing here by command, you can also do by group policy or by config file or by environment variable. There's on the project side, there's an example on how to do that.
Wow. Okay, so this seems like a really good solution for if you want to. Like
really
a lot of
handling.
quality of life features.
There's just one more thing I really must show, and I know I'm kind of taking time here, more time than I intended to. Underestimating demo times is unfortunately kind of my thing. So I have a local Hyper-V with 3 virtual machines that are running, but they do not have any network access. And of course, I kind of forgot to boot up the most important one. So let's do that. Blackie, I don't need you because you are in the wrong environment. Anyway, I have a console. I have a local Hyper-V. I can access them using PowerShell remoting using the virtual machine bus. I just need an elevated console for that. And I need some credentials, because without credentials, they kind of get grumpy. So this is definitely a highly complex password with absolutely not the default domain admin. And they are called dzret, admf ca, admf admin host. I'm now going to create new sessions, new PS session, VM name, and credential cred. So install PSF module and draw off. Computer name. They accept already established PowerShell sessions. That's okay. That's still okay.
So what we're seeing here is you're actually calling install PSF module and specifying sessions to your VMs or remote computers, basically.
Yes. You can also do computer names and credential if you don't want pre-established sessions.
Okay, so and that could be like the situation is you've written some PowerShell stuff. You're trying to roll out these repositories in your situation, and you can use this to get people set up with the new module that you're telling about them in Teams chat, but they're for some reason not using your module, and you go to the meeting with them and they never got it installed. Well, guess what? You can install it for them.
Yeah, nice. Or you can, as an admin, let's say you're an admin, you've got a SQL Server farm with 20 SQL servers that you're managing. You want a module of those 20 SQL servers? You get a list of the computer names, you go onto your admin machine, and you do install module for those target servers without having to connect to each individual server, configure them to use package management, tell them what repository to access them. They can't go into the internet directly. Your admin machine could have PS Gallery access, and you could install the official SQL Server module on all of them without ever leaving your machine. And it's doing it in parallel, so you also have performance. And incidentally, that is the reason why we get return objects, so you can see the different success states. Where did it work? Where did it not work?
Glorious. Glorious
demo. Now there's still one more amazing thing about that particular part that I need to point out.
Okay.
Now, this also supports SSH-based remoting sessions to a Linux machine. You can install modules from your Windows to a Linux machine and from a Linux host to a Windows machine.
Fred, you went there.
I absolutely went there. And Andrew, now this faces us with one more problem about this install module scope parameter. Because, Linux machines have different module paths than Windows machines.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell did Fred solve that?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
There's this get PSF module scope parameter, and it has, of course, it can tell us the existing ones. And the message box kind of getting in the way there. So there's something, but do you notice that this path parameter here is kind of empty?
Yeah.
But why, Fred, did you make it empty? Because you can instead do a script block that is going to be evaluated on every single target machine that you're installing to. And on Linux machines, well, there's this default path for modules.
And because you're saying return, it'll kick out during the if statements.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, by the way, if you're using install module with the computer name parameter, it defaults to the scope all users, rather than that thing. And well, that's it. That's how it works. I have some more toys, snippets, gadgets, and other fun things in there that can work, but that's the key benefit the module provides. And it's intended to just work, give you the same parameters no matter what PowerShellGet you have behind the scenes available. Oh, and on that note, sorry, I almost forgot that part, and it's easily done to demo now. I can install PSF PowerShellGet on the computer name, sessions, and I can tell it, please install the free latest. And now it's going to install PSResourceGet on all the sessions.
Wow. And that's a lot of people out there who've tried deploying modules in their environment to machines that aren't dev machines for PowerShell. You've probably run into that challenge.
So many times.
Yeah.
By the way, another quick important part. If you download psframework.NuGet plus the dependency, psframework, and convert to PSD1, you can copy that over into an offline environment, and this command is going to work without internet access. So this works in a 100% isolated environment.
Fred, you did it again, man. We're managing Linux machines for Windows. No big deal. That's just what we're doing on today's podcast. That was awesome. And the cool thing is like in totality, that is glorious. But along the way, even if just one of those things that you showed is helpful, that's a huge time saver. I mean, impressive stuff, man. That was very fun. Very fun. Appreciate you showing that to us and writing it, because I think the writing probably took a little bit longer.
Honestly, it took ages, but this Christmas break afterwards totally people out approaching New Year's Eve. I got into like a inspiration mode, and days kind of flew by and was like, oh my God, tomorrow I need to travel to the customer already. Oh, but this new baby is done, almost. So this is currently released under version 0.9. It is not still a 1.0 thing, because I'm pretty sure I missed a few edge cases, like, for example, the error message we saw before here. So I'm still going to push things. It's not going to change fundamentally. Like, this is still going to install the module on your local machine. It's designed to be intuitive. There might be some breakage in some of the more edge case parameterization. But a simple install PSF module, it's just going to run and work.
So it's install module, PSF module. So not PS framework?
I did not make it an integral part to PS framework itself, mostly because of the package size. In order for this install to work offline, the module needs to contain the full binaries of both PSResourceGet and PowerShellGet v2, and the binaries needed for offline operation, which is 5 megabytes. And I didn't want to bloat PS Framework by 5 megabytes for something that the majority of the pure PS Framework users are never going to use anyway. It is in the same way as PS Framework intended to be taken as a dependency for some of the features it's providing. But I did not want to directly integrate it into PS Framework, because it kind of provides an isolated service, even if I'm seeing it as part of my framework stack and not as a process layer module or something like that. It's
Awesome.
Sorry, getting too much into my mental model about how I structure modules there. But it's not PS Framework. It uses the same prefix because it is part of the same family and part of the same niche. I could have picked a different prefix, but I decided to stick with that because, well.
You know what, Fred? I'll give you an opportunity here. I'm going to give you, we'll say, 3 lines of PowerShell. Now, with these 3 lines of PowerShell, I'm going to put them in the show notes. And the people out there, they trust you, all right? They're going to read what the code is because they're smart PowerShellers. They've listened to these episodes before where we tell them, hey, you got to read the code before you run it. You can't just run everything you see on the internet. But you got 3 lines of code the people out there are going to run. What are you going to include in those lines? Hopefully installing some of these lovely modules we've covered here today. But what else are you going to include in those 3 lines? And you can't do any semicolon nonsense. Don't try and just make semicolon in one line. No, I know you. You'll write actually a PS util function that will go ahead and do that for an entire script. I know you too well.
You mean take something like,
oh my god,
whatever else, and then do something like, convert script to encode it, and then have everything combined into. Yes, I totally would have done that without the caveat. Okay, now that you have constrained the rules on me, and don't think I didn't catch what you did, I would absolutely, of course, install PSFramework.NuGet, which also installs PSFramework. And since install module accepts multiple modules as parameter name, I would also include PS module development.
Yep.
And PS util, because that gives you my entire toolkit stack for goodness. Then I would totally infect you with entroauth, which is totally unrelated with that I shipped the latest version today. And I like having convenient Entra authentication token access, graph API calls, and stuff like that. So those I would inflict on you. I could do more modules that might be nifty, that might be situationally great, but let's be honest, you can't just in case flood people with all of the modules and then expect them to take any benefit out of that. I'm already overloading people with this. So I'm going to call this a day. On that part, there's only one more absolutely critical thing I need to include there. And that's PS Jukebox.
Good call.
So for the second line, I'm going to call that PSU prompt Fred, because you need a Fred prompt, of course. And for the third one, I'm going to call invoke PSJTune with, come on, you can do that with the Imperial March, because there's nothing more Imperial epic than you are finished doing awesome stuff.
All right. Well, I want you to run it, though. I want to see what your prompt turns into.
You're already seeing that. That's what's putting the time the duration of last method.
Because you're the Fred. You're the Fred that this Fred is. Okay, so that makes sense.
So what the PSU prompt is also doing is truncating your path if you're going too deep into the bonies.
Nice. I like that. Awesome.
So that's that part. And the last one that I'm having you run, as mentioned, is invoke PSJTune.
Yes.
Because, you just need a little bit. I don't know whether you can hear that, but it transmits system sound on it.
The system beeps.
Yeah, it's just unreliable. Unfortunately, I need to revamp this into something that works reliable. But I can promise you this command is totally compatible with default Linux-based beep tunes, because they have entire notes collections about songs you can do with the beep sound.
Wow.
I made sure to maintain compatibility for this absolutely business-critical command. And by the way, this totally did not happen at the PowerShell Summit with a few beers too many and a bit battery life too much.
Well, hey, Fred, I look forward to this year's PowerShell Summit 2025 in April with you. We'll catch up over some beers. I'm going to cancel the screen share for now. I'll have a link to those 3 lines that you ran, so don't delete them. We'll have those in the show notes so people can get up to date. And man, Fred, we went to a lot of places in this 2-interview series. I appreciate you joining us, and you shared a lot of tips. What is one last tip? You gave us a great one last time, and that was to make modules and really get involved. What's your last tip for us here?
Absolutely critical tip. This is one of the absolutely most fundamental statements I can tell you. Refuse to suffer. Configure your console to work well for you. You're not a guest in your console. Your console life doesn't have to be a pain, a trail of agony and suffering, a trail of tears. It can be awesome. Don't refuse to optimize. It's not that I always need to shift from one machine to the other. You can remote, you can live with some machines not being that way, but your console on your home machine is your home. It can be optimized. It's the start of tool building if you can actually use your tools, and the profile and the console experience is kind of important. And Andrew, I'm going to share with you afterwards a link to a blog post that has a guidance on how you can set up home in your PowerShell profile and the PowerShell console to make your console life more fun and entertaining.
I got to be honest. In between these, I think you asked me what my prompt looked like, and I told you, "Oh, I'm just going for the console, the default experience." Is that why you said this? Are you trying to give me personal life advice right now?
Honestly, yes. You totally deserve that.
Dang.
Also, it's kind of a huge help, for everybody to know that instead of the tab key, you can hit Control Spacebar, which is also part of those things you should be doing, or that you can do multiple lines and once, and all of the other fun tricks and how the whole thing works. And Andrew, you totally should not use vanilla consoles. This is making your life harder than it needs to be, and PowerShell is about empowering you, not about wasting your coffee break with doing things the slow way. Please, Andrew.
It's 2025. What am I doing? I'm becoming a caveman.
Absolutely.
I need a top hat and a cane. I'm going the wrong way, man. Okay. Thank you, Fred, for saving me.
It's an absolute pleasure and honor. I mean, it's my civic duty.
Hey, thank you. I think pretty soon here, we're going to be wrapping things up, but I want to say thank you so much for joining me again, Fred, and sharing so many. You shared wisdom, you shared PowerShell tips, you shared tools that have taken a lot of experience, not only the time you put into developing the tools, but the time that you've put into getting the experience to be able to develop the tools. And I appreciate it. You've always been also just a very kind person along the way. So I really admire anyone who has excellent technical skills, is willing to share that with others, and is also kind on top of it. So you got the trifecta, Fred. You're a winner in my book. Thank you again for joining us on the PowerShell podcast.
It's been an honor, Andrew. Anytime.
I'm not afraid to hold you up on that one. And I appreciate you joining me for PowerShell Wednesday as well. And that's every Wednesday at about 2 p.m. Eastern, 30 minutes, PowerShell community, getting together, learning things, sharing what we're working with, asking questions, and just doing the community thing. That's one of my favorite things about PowerShell. Check us out on the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. I'm on socials at Andrew Pla Tech. On Blue Sky, I'm andrewpla.tech. Fred, where are you on the World Wide Web? People want to connect with you and tell you how great your projects are. Where can we find you?
Well, you can definitely find me on GitHub. Fred Weinmann is my account name. You can also find me on psframework.org, which just has all the links to my GitHubs to find me there. Other than that, I used to be the place of the dead bird. I moved on to Blue Sky. But honestly, I kind of forgot my Blue Sky name. Might be Fred Weinmann to say him again, but honestly, I'm
link in the show
I'm not
notes.
looking at mine initially.
I'll have the link there for you. I think most important, check out his GitHub. He's got some amazing stuff. And these are projects that you can install. And I love projects where there are so many singular commands that can add value and be fun and teach you more about PowerShell. And don't be afraid to actually check the repository, check out the GitHub, see how he's put all this together, see the code behind it, and decipher and learn a thing or two along the way. Thank you, everybody. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. If you are on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.